Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today, I have the absolute pleasure to speak with Jothy Rosenberg, who is a serial entrepreneur, 9X startup founder, who has two successful exits, and is a renowned speaker. Jothy, I would love to begin with more about your background story, how you got started into entrepreneurship, and really what you're doing today.
Well, thanks for having me on, and it's wonderful to chat with you as well. Um, so my backstory is it can't be separated from the fact that when I was 16, I got diagnosed with a rare kind of bone cancer, which took my right leg. And back then, chemotherapy had not yet been invented, unfortunately, and that was an aggressive cancer that likes to what's called metastasize. And it typically metastasizes to the lung. Even though it's a bone cancer, it still likes that tissue. And 3 years later, at this point, I was in college. It showed up on tests, and I had to have my left lung removed. And fortunately, now at that point, chemotherapy had just come out. So I went through a heck of a lot, both physically, losing a leg, which is a big deal. Uh, Losing a lung, which isn't visible to people, is in some ways a bigger deal. Having a challenge in breathing, and then there's the psychological trauma because the doctors didn't know very much yet about chemo, and they said to me a truthful statement, which is, when this kind of cancer spreads, no one has ever survived. And I was 19, and hearing that was not pleasant. So I quit college and became a ski bum. I wanted to ski really, really well on one ski. And I skied 100 days straight without ever taking a day off. And I got very good at skiing. And what that taught me was, oh, you know what? If I focus hard and work really hard at something, I can accomplish this feat of being able to ski double black diamond slopes, steep, deep, whatever it took. And I was out skiing two-leggers. That's what I call you guys.
I love that.
And so that all of this sort of extended outside of just the realm of like sports to other things. So I went back to college, finished, couldn't think of anything better to do because, of course, I still had this monkey on my back that I thought I was not going to be around for long. So I said, well, I kind of liked school actually, so maybe I'll go get a master's and then I got a PhD, and I just kept going. And I was sort of very naturally a professor. Once you're a PhD, you're it's natural to be a professor. But I was working on something that was a research contract for NASA that was so fascinating. And I got this itch. Well, this should be turned into a startup company. What the heck? And I didn't know anything about how to do that. I was a university professor, and before that, I was just a student. But I knew I couldn't do it where I was, which was I had done my degree and I was a professor at Duke. And in North Carolina at the time, there wasn't really a startup culture of any kind. So I moved to California, to Silicon Valley, and I started it there. And that was fun. I learned a lot, but it wasn't a great outcome. And then I got a chance to move to Boston, which is where I am now, and have been here for 29 years. And then once you do a startup, you even if it isn't a great success, you kind of get that itch, and it's hard to get rid of. And then we can talk about some of the startups, but
Absolutely.
as you said, I did 9 at that point.
And I wanted to backtrack for a second. How foundational was that skiing situation for you? That those 100 days where you proved yourself you can get very good at something. How foundational was that for you?
Well, extremely, because as I outlined in a TED talk that I did, there are three traits that I think someone with a disability naturally develops that leads to their success. And they are insecurity, exceptionalism, and discipline. And insecurity comes naturally. It's the feeling like, well, um, I'm reminded that I have a disability every day. You get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and you have to find your crutches in the dark. That's a reminder that
Right.
this is how it is. So insecurity is there all the time. And but what happens is that, and this is where skiing comes in, is that I got a sense that while this was going to be extremely hard, and just for a quick aside, the problem in skiing is that you don't steer with just one foot in skiing. You steer with essentially you steer with your big toe, but I no longer had a big toe on the right side. I had no toe on the right side. And so I had to learn to steer with the big toe and the pinky, the little toe,
Wow.
on the same foot. But I had a sense that this was achievable.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened is that I would have a little success. Okay, I just did a little bit of a turn without falling. That's like
Mm-hmm.
a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing, and this is basically a statement about life. If you focus on something you want to be really good at, and
Mm-hmm.
you put in the time and the work, and very importantly, you celebrate each little victory and set another goal. And maybe all your goals should be kind of modest goals. Don't set a ginormous goal, but after a while, you're going to have made a series of these, successes. And that's where exceptionalism came in.
Mm-hmm.
And exceptionalism becomes addictive. You
Mm-hmm.
want to do better and better because, wow, that felt good to achieve that goal. And that now the third trait comes in, which is the discipline,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the ability to just keep at it, to set goals, to just keep working hard. So what I and by the way, these three traits are not unique in any way to somebody with a disability. It's just that someone with a disability is maybe more driven than
Yes.
other people.
And
And
our
that's the
own,
answer there.
and I was going to ask you is it's almost as if you have to be more disciplined, you have to be more capable because you're reminded every day you have the discipline, like you said. So do you think that from a perspective like yours, is it that you're is it necessary for you to have this, or is it something that you build?
You mean, is it necessary to have a disability to do
No, no,
this?
no. Is it necessary to build a discipline while you have a disability?
Well, I do think so, because
Mhm.
I think when something really, a major knockdown in life happens to you, and by the way, it doesn't have to be a disability, but it's something that changes your life. It could be that a
Agreed.
really important relationship ends, or someone that you really are close to dies. It could be a whole you know many things. But for me, it was a disability, and there's I feel like you're at the peak. You're at the peak of a roof, and you could fall one way, which is you're gonna fight this, you're gonna overcome it, or you're gonna go the other way, and you're gonna sort of wallow in self pity. And I don't mean to be too negative about it, but I don't think there's a middle ground. I think
Right.
that's the two outcomes.
Absolutely. And I could not agree more. Everyone has their own version of difficulty, including myself when I was 240 pounds. And my story was not dissimilar from you showing yourself you're capable of change in the skiing situation. When I was 240 pounds, I could barely run. And I remember going to a certain park where I would ask myself, is it possible to get to the very end of that park without essentially stopping? And it was about a 1 to 2 mile run essentially. And at the time, I could only do 0.3 of a mile. And every single day I tried it, I would go a little bit further. I would go a little bit further. And at some point, I actually got to the 1 mile. And that was the point where I thought to myself, I'm actually capable of change. It's a thrill. It is a massive thrill when you get there. Because then at that point, you ask yourself, what else can you do? What else can I do? What else can I do? Can I go ahead and do this venture? Can I go ahead and try this new activity? Can I go ahead and try this new achievement that I want to get, etc. So I think that is absolutely excellent when you have a difficulty that you overcome and that you pull through instead of, unfortunately, which is prevalent, and that could be prevalent with people, is going down that slope where you don't succeed and you do wallow self-pity. So I wanted to now move the conversation to more about your entrepreneurial experience. I understand that you've had 2 successful exits, and I want to know more about what those companies were, how you started them, what gaps in the market you identified, and more about what the companies were about.
Great, sure. So, like I said, that first one got me going, but it wasn't a great success. But right after that, there were a variety of reasons that we ended up moving to Boston, and I joined forces with a group of 4 other. They were all very technical guys. So there was a group of 5 of us founders, and I knew them from having worked with them across country because I had joined another company after my startup. It was a big company, and we had acquired this little startup where these guys were from. And I went to Boston because I wanted to make sure that that acquisition was very successful, and it was going to help my division that I was running in this big company. But the big company kind of got into its own trouble, and it was going to go nowhere. And we all decided to leave and do something on our own. And we had technology that was pretty powerful at doing what was called at the time client server, basically architecture. And what all that meant is that nowadays we know there are servers, and servers live in data centers in the cloud, and then clients are your phone, your laptop, your office computer, but that was a new thing right then. This was 1996. The web was coming alive though, but the web needed client server to operate, and no one had applied it to it yet. So basically, every web server, of which there are now 1 billion, was going to need this capability called load balancing. Imagine if you go to a website and it only has one web server, and they put out an advertisement that attracts hundreds of thousands of people. Well, their web server is going to crash. Their one and only web server. Load balancing says it looks to the world like there's only one address to go to, but it's basically hundreds of servers, or thousands in the case of somebody like Facebook. And the reason it doesn't crash is because everybody goes to facebook.com.
Okay.
But that is not hitting the same server when you go and when I go.
So they're all independent web servers.
Right. And it's load balanced between them.
Got it.
And so this was a new concept. Well, basically, what we say in sort of teaching people about startups is that you get the market right, and you can have an okay team, not a great team. You can even have an okay product. But if the market is an absolutely barn-burning market, you can be successful. Well, we actually had a great team, and we had this product that worked extremely well. And our lighthouse customer was Fidelity, and they needed this very badly to show people their 401ks. And so there we were 2 years in. We'd only raised $4 million. We were doing
Hmm.
2 million in revenue, and we were bought for 53 times revenues for 106 million. And
Wow.
that's
Wow.
because the market was the web.
Absolutely. And if we think about the product itself, it's a difference between individuals or companies delivering their services or not delivering them. Because you're saying they want to show their 401k. However, without your product, their website would crash for a lot of their users. So that's the difference between delivering the service or not delivering it. So actually wanted to follow up with that statement. What do you think is the principles you go by to validate any of your ideas as an entrepreneur? If you want to start a specific company, how do you validate the idea? How do you see if it's viable?
So as I alluded here a minute ago, you're going to need to figure out what the market is. Now, usually when somebody has an idea, they're recognizing there's some problem and they think they have a solution. And what you have to find out is, okay, you have to find out for whom and what will it take for those people in that are those for whom's what would it take for this to be something they would pay money for. So today we have a great tool for getting an answer to that question, and it might surprise you, but it's LinkedIn. Okay, LinkedIn has 950 million, just shy of a billion users. And most people just don't ever try to use LinkedIn in this way. But you can ask LinkedIn to show me all of your first and second level connections. So that's everyone that is directly connected to you and all of the people that are directly connected to them as well. That's a big number usually.
Right.
Okay, so for me that's like 1.5 million people, and you could say, well, show me those people in how many of those people are in this market, because like I said, you might have an idea. Since you understand there is a problem and you think you have a solution, you might
Hmm.
understand, you might think a market to test. So you start testing it by using LinkedIn, and you start having conversations with these people, because if they're level 1, you know them pretty well. If they're level 2, well, you have a friend that knows them pretty well. So you
And
can get conversations started.
the market is the most important. So you're getting direct market feedback with the product. That's the most important, you would say.
Yeah, absolutely. You get that right, and you're on your way. Yes, yes, sir.
And the market is what allows your company to succeed. So catering to them is the most important. And I love that you're coming up with the idea with the LinkedIn. I think it's underused, like you said, absolutely and utterly a lot. So I wanted to ask you, with regard to your second company, what was that about, and why did you start that company?
Um, so I had a close friend who, and he and I spent a lot of time talking about, again, the web. People were doing uh, individual consumers were doing lots of transactions. By this time, so what was the date? It was about 1999. So for all intents and purposes, the web began in 95, and so 4 years later, it was cooking, and people were using it to do credit card transactions. It was just the beginning of that. And we wondered, well, what about businesses? When were businesses going to start doing real business with each other over the web? Ordering parts and whatever, B2B kinds of things. So we decided this was also going to be huge, but it was only going to work if you knew for sure that the 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 entity that you were talking to is really who they said they were. Because, by the way, we were already starting to see some fraud on the internet. Sadly, of course, it's human nature. People trying to steal money, and they're pretending to be somebody they're
Of
not.
course.
So but we thought this was a real opportunity. So that was the basis for GeoTrust's first incarnation. Well, we were a little bit early to market, which is a common problem for startups. And fact is, we were probably 10 years too early. So we had to pivot. And what we pivoted to was increasing, we just started to work on the issue of increasing trust overall on the internet. And I don't know if you remember, but in the early days that you would look in your browser and there was a lock symbol. Do you ever remember seeing that?
I probably was too young. I'm actually, I was probably too young.
That could be. So in the early days, they wanted to show you that it was safe to put in your credit card or your address or anything, and they would put a lock symbol. Well, there's no point of putting a lock symbol now because every web connection is now considered secure. But there was a difference back then. And the thing that made these secure is something called a digital certificate, and it has to be installed on a web server. And so we decided, well, there's a big player in the web certificate business, and it was a company called VeriSign. They're still big. They're still around, but they were. In order for somebody to get a digital certificate from them, it took. It was a manual process, and it took at least 4 days. So you would fill out all these forms. You'd talk to somebody. They would check your business records. Where were you incorporated? Do you have a letter from the IRS that says you're a valid company, and so forth and so on.
Good.
And what we noticed is that, well, there's databases all over the world, all over and accessible over the web for all of this information, and everything from driver's license databases to Dun and Bradstreet keeps records on every company, et cetera. And so we did some experiments. We said, okay, this is a big problem. The number of digital certificates that was getting purchased was growing fast because the web was growing so fast. So essentially, I was trying to capitalize on another aspect of the web market, except now it was the web trust market. It was, how do I know I can trust you? How do I know I can trust you enough to put my credit card number in? And so we figured out a way to automate the process and to get all the information that we needed in 10 minutes. So they charged a lot of money because it was a manual process and it took 4 days. We started up our business and we said, hey, you'll have it in 10 minutes and it'll be just as good as the one from them.
Wow.
And then we set a goal. We said, okay, our mission now is to get acquired because they're so big that
and you're so
VeriSign
useful. You're so useful as well.
Yeah. And so we said, okay, how long do we think it'll take for them to purchase us? We decided that when we moved 25% of the market away from them over to us, they would have no choice but to acquire us.
Absolutely.
We did it in 25 months. It took a month. Each month we gained another point of market share. And after 25 months, they bought us for 7 times revenues. We were doing 25 million in revenues, just selling digital certificates. They bought us for 125 million.
Wow. Congratulations on that. And I'm pleased to hear that you identified a problem and you solved it efficiently very well here as well. So I wanted to now move this conversation to more about you, Jothy. And the first question I had for you is, what is something about you or about your life that you wish more people knew about?
Well, I'm trying to do for kids that get a disability what I had to do the hard way myself. And so I started in 2014. I started a foundation. By the way, I have this catchphrase. I've actually trademarked it, and it is "Who says I can't?" I I came up with that because at a young age, I had a lot of people telling me, "Well, you can't ski again. You can't swim because you'll just go in a circle. You can't bike because you're lopsided and you'll fall over. Can't." It was ridiculous. Um, and I rebelled against that. And 25 years after I figured all these things I could do, I became a competitive open water swimmer. I've done bikeathons. I've ridden my bike from Boston to New York City 4 times. Um, I do a lot of these sort of extreme sports, and and then I wrote a book about what it was like to go through all this. And it's right there. It's called Who Says I Can't? That's the name of the book. And I created this foundation to actively help kids who have a disability get into a sport they love. Usually that means getting some sort of equipment, adaptive equipment. So we've gotten running legs for kids, both if they have an above knee or below knee amputation, waterproof legs so that they can surf or just play in the ocean, um, special snowboarding legs for if snowboarding is their thing, and even devices for people that are paralyzed, and but still want to participate in a sport. Anyway, it's a these are expensive devices. A running leg costs about $20,000 or up, um, and it's hard to raise money. So
Mhm.
I have a website, whosaysIcan't.org, and I'm always looking for help to help these kids. It's a public charity. It's a 501c3 organization, and it's just a family run thing. It's my wife and me, and my daughter and her husband. So it's the four of us that run this foundation. But we help 2 or 3 kids a year,
Mhm.
and I have videos of them on the website. It'll bring tears to people's eyes to see what we can do for people.
Who says I can't.org. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I want to learn more about who is your 20-year-old self and are you similar to him today?
Oh, my 20 my 20-year-old self was still reeling from what had happened to me at 19,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I was, at that point I basically had just come back from um, a year of being a ski bum, and I did decide to finish college. Um, it's kind of interesting that there's a every 20-year-old I've ever known thinks they're immortal and can be a little bit cocky, I suppose. What are you, 20? You're 20 something?
I'm 20. Exactly.
You're 20. Okay.
Yeah.
So you probably think you're immortal, and um, I wouldn't use the word cocky to your face, but you probably got a lot of self-confidence. And I had a little bit of that, but I still had that insecurity. Um, but I met uh, my wife. We've now been together 45 years. When I was 20, and she was a little older than me, and I went after her. I really wanted her to be my girlfriend and eventually my wife. So, and I'm amazed that she even liked me because I was kind of cocky, but she saw something. She figured she could mold me and into what was,
Okay.
what she wanted.
Okay. Got it. Got it. I love that story. So, would you say you're similar to your 20-year-old self in some ways today?
Um, well, I have a fair amount of confidence. I have a lot of experience. Experience tends to add a little bit of humility because you realize that you can't do everything. Um, but I have, what I've transformed myself basically from being a guy who's going to found and run companies. I'm running my ninth startup now. It's called Dover, but I'm in the process of selling it, and then I'm not going to start a new one. Instead, I want to give back. I want to take the experience of the real world experience, lots of mistakes, but good things too. You've heard about a couple of good things in these 9 startups. You notice that I only told stories about 2 of them because the rest were not great outcomes, and
Mm-hmm.
that's typical of the world of startups. The average is basically 8 out of 10 startups fail.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on kind of on track. 2 out of 9 were very successful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the way I'm going to give back is that I wrote this book called Tech Startup Toolkit. That's the closer one. That one came out just last summer. It's not even been out a year, and it's my experiences, but it's focused on all the things you need to get right as a startup founder. Second thing is my podcast, which is called Designing Successful Startups. I probably haven't been doing it as long as you, but I just recently recorded episode number 80, and they are all the guests are all startup founders, and they're telling their experiences. And the third thing is that I have just launched an online course where there's videos and uh, and printed material that are things like templates and checklists, and it'll be a total of 60 episodes across 4 different um, big topic areas. You know, how to get your startup going and funded, and then how to make sure that it's going to succeed, which is proving product market fit and all of that stuff. Then the third area is all about your team. How do you build a great dream team, align them with your company goals, hire them, and grow them as you scale. And then the last section is about the outcomes that we hope for. Um, how do you get acquired and things like that. So on my site, on my own site, jothyrosenberg.com, I have more information about the online course.
And that sounds like something that would certainly save people years of mistakes. So I think that'd be worth checking out. So where do people check that out again?
At jothyrosenberg.com.
JothyRosenberg.com. Perfect. So I know we're near time. I'm going to share one perspective about fitness and health, and we'll conclude the podcast with some next year plans you'd like to plug in. So one perspective I'd like to share on fitness and health is this. After I personally had lost over 70 pounds, which I can show right here, I think the primary issue that people run into is what they believe is required to make their transformation. Going to the gym and dieting are obviously the pre-sold ways to get in good physical shape and to reclaim your health. However, the main thing I would like to ask you and challenge people to do is challenge the requirements to make your own physical transformation. Why? Because first, that pre-sold, that mainstream way of getting in shape, a lot of entrepreneurs I've spoken to, a lot of people who travel, they can't use that pathway. Being location dependent, having to commit to driving to a location is something that a lot of people can't do, and therefore believe the idea of a transformation is not possible for them, and thereby they can't live the experience of a healthy life. So first, I would say challenge the requirements because there's other ways to make this happen. And the only way you figure out those ways is by challenging the requirements. And this is what a founder does as well. You rigorously challenge the requirements. You look at the existing solutions, you understand why they're effective, and you come up with an even more effective solution. So That being said, if you look at the primary driver behind a fitness transformation, losing weight, it's not about the time you spend in the gym. It's about how effective you are at creating a negative energy balance, which is when you're burning more calories than you're consuming on a daily basis. So, with that being the only requirement, this opens up a multitude of avenues you can take to make your own physical transformation. And in my opinion, the most effective one is a location independent approach, something you can do anytime, anywhere, and while you listen to a podcast or on a phone call. Because if you have this as an approach, there's essentially zero barriers to make your own physical transformation and zero barriers to actually reclaiming your health, being able to move the way you want to move, look the way you want, etc. So I think with that, we can conclude the fitness conversation, and we'll go ahead and move on to your next year plans, Jothy. And it was a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm just going to try to get this course out,
Mhm.
and then people who take the course can get individual mentoring sessions with me. So I just hope to kind of sort of ease into retirement because next year I turn 70, so I'm a little older than you, my friend. Um, and my retirement is really going to be switching into this mode, which is giving back to disabled kids, as I
Mhm.
described, and giving back to startup founders and
Love
helping
it.
the next generation with my experiences.
And you're already starting today with me. So thank you so much for that. And it was a pleasure to have you on.
It was a pleasure to be here, and maybe I can get you to come on my podcast because this is a business. What you've got,
Sure,
you're a
absolutely. I'd
startup.
love to.
You're a startup founder.
Let's do that. Let's do it. So this was Ari Mohindra and Jody Rosenberg. Thank you so much for listening.